Coogs house. Over the weekend, the Houston Cougars won the game of the year, and we just can't stop talking about it, and neither can anyone else.
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougars, daily podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate making us your first listen each and every day. If you want to join the conversation, but you don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below how you drink your coffee, because I imagine this is the kind of game that people will be talking about at the coffee pot in the office Monday morning. Houston beats Kansas in a thriller over the weekend. I guess the game finished, I should point out, in double overtime. Houston wins 92-86. And there was just so many reasons they shouldn't have won that game. I got a couple things I want to break down in today's show that is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. We got more on that fun later, but I kind of want to just talk about this being like the best game of the year and the consensus of that on Sunday as people broke it down. This became a culture battle between two very distinctly different programs. And then I also, as I promised in the post game on Saturday night, did say I would talk to you some about the X's and O's in this one because it is a fun match between two great coaches. But on Sunday, with no college football games on Saturday and no NFL games on Saturday, college basketball carried the sports landscape, and Houston was at the top of that conversation as they came back and won a very improbable game, to say the very least. It was at the top of SportsCenter, at the top of YouTube pages, at the top of X, Twitter, social, whatever you're on. They were talking Houston Cougar basketball, and rightfully so. They earned it. Houston came back and won this game that just no one, certainly no one outside of the program, outside of Coug fans, would have expected them to win. Certainly not a given point to the game. So Houston at the end of this one, I guess Kansas should say, had an 80.6% chance to win based on ESPN's win probability score with 35 seconds left in regulation. That was as high as 86% with 90 seconds left when Houston was down 66-60. Houston forced overtime. Kansas that would then have a 99% win probability rate with 18 seconds to go in double overtime when DeJuan Harris got the defensive rebound and was fouled. It was 79-73. He would then miss both free throws. Houston would come down and get kind of a casual, like last few seconds, Emmanuel Sharp three to cut the lead 2-3 and go into an immediate full court press. Now, here's the key. Houston had already forced a 5-second violation in the clutch moments earlier, and so Kansas calls timeout. Houston gets the ball. Kansas takes the ball out. Houston puts JoJo Tugler on the ball, meaning that Mylik Uzan is now covering Hunter Dickinson. Because of that switch, they wanted Tugler's length on the ball. Again, 6'8", 7'6" wingspan. You want him covering the ball, right? Uzan is then covering Dickinson. They try to inbound the ball to him. Uzan is able to tip it. The ball ends up in Malik Wilson's hands, the hero of the day, who takes a sidestep dribble back behind three-point line, hits the three to tie it up. About 2 seconds left. Kansas missed the half-court heave to go to double overtime. Double overtime was all things Houston. Now, again, 99% win probability for Kansas with 18 seconds to go, and Houston pulled it out. DeJuan Harris at the free throw line. It's a fifth-year starter. Was a starting point guard on the team when they won it all in 2022. Kansas is preseason number one, now 5-3, and it feels like they can't make the conference. They were the number one team in America for the first month of the season. They beat Carolina, Michigan State, Duke. They can't beat Houston. Now, analytical folks look at this game, and when factoring a bunch of different typical point differentials for road stadiums, specifically different like hard places to play, like Phog Allen up there in Kansas, are already calling this statistically and analytically speaking the most impressive victory for an opponent, given the place they were playing and who they were playing and so on, right? And I wonder about some of that because, analytics don't always count for everything. But it certainly did feel like an impressive game. The moment has been discussed as such, again, on all the major outlets since then over the course of the day. Sunday, national basketball publications, Field of 68 and others also calling for Jawan Roberts being in the All-American conversation. For what it's worth, I think he's also looking like he's the Big 12 Player of the Year. In 8 Big 12 games, he's broken 20 in 4 of them. 3 of the ones he did not break 20 in, he played less than 30 minutes because they were blowouts. And so you got to think when it's again gut punching time or whatever, it's time to find Jawan Roberts. And so I feel like that trend will continue as things go. And he was certainly the man. We'll get the X and O's at the end of the show, but he was certainly the man in this one. He's certainly the culture warrior in this one. And it was such a tremendous victory that people talked about all over the different necks of the internet and television, stuff like that, talking about Houston. And I got to say, it's nice to be there. Houston opened the season in the second game of the year playing fellow top 5 team Auburn on a neutral floor at the Toyota Center. I say neutral because it really, looked like it was. They had the split tickets with A&M and stuff for anybody. Anyway, um, and lost that one, and then lost a couple in Vegas. All those being fairly nationally recognized, people kind of put Houston on the back burner. And I don't necessarily think that it's important to anyone in the program to be top billing or anything like that. But it was a nice reminder for the national audience on ESPN. We can talk about it for a second at a later date, I guess, why they haven't staggered these games correctly, because they're going to miss the first few minutes on the ESPN live telecast. You got to go to ESPN Plus, ESPN News, bogusness. But live TV, everyone's watching Houston go to double overtime and steal the will to win. They stole the win because they stole the will to win out of the jaws of the Kansas Jayhawks. A tremendous victory in that one. And I want to address one comment and one kind of sway I see happening here, right? And there's a lot of people saying that there was some luck involved in this or some luck involved in that, and Kansas missed those free throws, or Kansas missed that rotation, or Hudson Dickinson just didn't catch that one ball. Da, 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 da. And it's crazy to me, absolutely crazy. As someone who watches between 12 and 15 basketball games a week these days, sometimes I speed them up and they all kind of blend together. And I'm watching for this show and scouting and the high school stuff I do and so on. Da, 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 da. But it's crazy to me in all the basketball that I watch how the team that plays harder finds luck. How often the team that works harder is the team that finds luck. And it's crazy that what lucky this happened, lucky that happened, da 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 da. And I'm not saying there aren't unlucky things, injuries, the way the ball bounces, et cetera, that happen. But we also continue to find these close kind of games that, oh, Houston got super lucky. No, they also worked and worked and worked harder. And the teams that work harder find more luck more often. If Kansas had won this game, no one been talking about lucky Kansas, right? Houston's banged up and Houston had a cold free throw night and you caught him at the right time. No one would have been talking about all of that had this been a lucky win for Kansas. No, because they couldn't find the luck. The luck comes to people that are working for it. And this was that working for Houston. There's no thing that says that just because DeJuan Harris missed those 2 free throws that Houston has to find a way to score 6 points in 17 seconds. That doesn't just happen. They made it happen. Houston's been doing this, has been doing this for a long time, and continues to get disrespected on it. I mean, they came to the Big 12 and won the whole thing last year by 2 full games the regular season. And they're a game up on Iowa State and Arizona presently. Those 2 teams play Monday night in a big Monday matchup, so one of them will be in third. And Houston has this tough stretch of the season. They play, it's like Baylor, Arizona State, Iowa State Tech in like a 14-day span. I'm not saying it's an easy road to do the repeat of the conference regular season championship, but if I'm picking someone to do it, I'm picking these guys and the culture and getting it done that way. Now, I do want to talk about the cultural difference that showed up in this game and how obvious and painfully obvious it came up in the second watch on Sunday. But before we get too far, I do want to remind you that today's show is brought to you by TurboTax. Now, this message is from our sponsors over at Intuit. TurboTax. Taxes are waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to get any money back. That's what tax season's all full of. And then you're waiting and wondering and worrying some more. But now taxes has become just matching up with TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives you their undivided attention, gives your taxes that same undivided attention as they work on your return. You get a real time update on their progress. You can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All you get to do is just sign up, and you get all the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. This is what taxes are now. With Intuit TurboTax, get an expert now at turbotax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only available in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at turbotax.com/guarantees. Parker Ainsworth locked on Coogs. You're talking Houston's big 92-86 double overtime victory over the Kansas Jayhawks in the feared Phog Allen Stadium. And I mentioned the first segment that this game, painfully obvious in the second watch on Sunday, became a big time culture war down the stretch. I should point out that for Houston, that meant there was no quit, never die mentality, nothing of the sort. Houston was going to fight until after the final whistle to claw and scratch and strive for every single point they could. And they're going to make sure they deflected and prevented and did as much as they could to keep Kansas from scoring. Again, 86 points. We got to play that. Matt, got to remind yourself they played 50 minutes of basketball in this one. Kansas, on the other hand, I would point out, did kind of quit. I mentioned Houston was down 6 with 17 seconds in the first overtime and found a way to get it to the second. Kansas was down 5 with a minute 40 left in the second overtime. They were down 6 with 40 seconds left in that overtime. And visibly, their body language was shut down. They were done. They were at home. They wanted to go back to their dorm rooms. They looked ready to quit. Meanwhile, up by 5 points with about 2 minutes left, Emmanuel Sharp, who played this game on a bum ankle, is sliding across the floor, poking the ball out of guys' hands, forcing steals. He slid across the floor on his butt to get that steal. Can we talk how crazy that is? He's gathering his footing. He's got a bad ankle. He slides across the floor on his backside and bats the ball down to force a steal in key moment situation where he's up 5 with 2 minutes to go. Up 5. Like, just tremendous culture moment out of him as well. You can't say enough about guys like Mylik and stuff too, just taking advantage of every single moment while they're out there. Kansas came into this game as the number one team in America, or came into the season, I should say, as the number one team in America. And now at 5-3, I don't know if they can really show up and win the Big 12. They were the number one team for the first month of the season. I mentioned the first segment they beat Carolina, Michigan State, Duke. It looks like Houston might have broken them. On those same national kind of conversation, I was saying Houston's at the top of the comments down below, or talking to Derek, who works up there with Locked On Jayhawks. He's a great guy. I don't mean to say he had anything to do with this, but his comment sections, his replies to tweets and stuff like that, they're questioning starting lineups and rotations and shot distributions. They're all kind of at this limbo where they don't know what's happening. And it's the end of January up there. And Houston has very much done that to them. This program, had they snuck out with that win, had Emmanuel Sharp 3 not go on in, or Malik Wilson's 3 not gone in, and Kansas escapes with the win, are they feeling those same things? That they had the same glaring holes for any point of the game, and Houston broke them to where they had to look in the mirror and see it all. It was just a crazy, crazy outcome. And I want to stress, like, Houston didn't have to not quit this game. Now, they did because of who their coach is and the program, the culture they've instilled in there for over 10 years at this point. But a loss in overtime at Phog Allen in late January for your first Big 12 loss would not have been a bad loss. You wouldn't have fallen far in the standings. You'd probably still end up tied for the number one place, seed right now in the Big 12 conference on Monday. You'd probably still in the top 10 of the AP poll come Monday. You clearly weren't on your A game. You missed free throws at an alarming rate. Emmanuel and LJ Cryer shot the ball really poorly throughout the end of the first overtime. I mean, Emmanuel's first points or that three with less than 17 seconds left in the game. And Emmanuel did hit some key clutch ones later, but like you could have just chalked this one up as, hey, they were better that night. We played 10 times. We probably beat them 9 of them, but that was a bad night for us. Or, tough place to play. Let's play on a neutral floor at home. We got them by 30, like whatever, right? It certainly would have been a lot better loss than you had to them a year ago, which I'll remind you is the last regular season Big 12 loss for this Houston program. But they didn't do any of that. They didn't make any of those excuses. They didn't feel sorry for themselves in any of those ways. That wasn't what this program was. Meanwhile, Kansas was upset they had to play a second overtime. They were sulking. They were shoulders down, faces at the ground, just shaking heads. They couldn't believe it. They could not believe it was happening. And, I want to say that, and I'm not a big in the pro sports about built and bought and whatever, and I'm sure it's going to come to college with the way the house settlements look like it's going to head and things shifting or whatever. But Kansas is a team that is, relatively speaking, a very well purchased team. They, in the 2024 transfer portal rankings, had the number 2 team on three. They got 6 transfers in. The year before, they got Hunter Dickinson as the top guy in the transfer portal. They're the only team in the top 10 of the transfer portal rankings of 2024 that did not have a major coaching change as of recent years. For reference, Houston, who lost Damian Dunn and pulled in Mylik in the summer of 24, they were 53rd. Kansas spends an estimated, again, on 3 numbers here, but $5 million in NIL on that basketball program by the same metrics, so same estimations and stuff like that. They got Houston at less than 1. Now, I don't think that's completely accurate. I know Landon Gosling's done some pretty cool stuff. Lincoln Coogs has some stuff set up that I just don't think that's quite accurate. It's just what they've got on the books, what they've got out there. But regardless, those metrics are the same for both schools, and it's more than 5 times as much money being spent on the Kansas roster, and they don't look like they enjoy playing basketball or playing together in the same way that Houston and the Cougs do. Look, I'm not saying that Houston hasn't benefited from the transfer portal. Mylik Uzan was a vital part of winning, played probably his best offensive game as a Cougar on Saturday night. LJ Cryer came in from Baylor the year before. You go back and find, I guess, in a pre-NIL era, you can find Kyler Edwards or Quentin Grimes or whatever. Like, Houston's benefited from the transfer world, right? But they've built a culture that those guys jump into. And it looks like, to me, Kansas just kind of went out, kind of like Kansas State did, and just bought a bunch of good players and hoped it worked. And that's not working. And this idea of culture building and program building and, and all of that in the NIL world is like kind of topsy-turvy for some of these good coaches. I think Bill Self's a good coach, right? But now that everyone's kind of got a level playing field, being able to buy players, to pay for players, etc., you're seeing who can build a program with more than just dollars. And I don't know, you can look at these 2 programs and think that the culture isn't a gigantic difference. They've got all the recruit stars. They've got the more recent national championship. They've got guys all over the NBA, although I'd point out that there's been a lot from Houston recently. But the culture is the difference. And Houston entered over each overtime period ready to roll. Kansas wanted to fold it up. It was visibly obvious. They wanted to fold it up and go home, and they were broken. And the fans are, like I said, ready to fold up the season and talk about what's going wrong here and what went wrong there and da 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 da. Building a culture, buying a culture. There's a significant difference between those two. I'm not saying that the only thing the difference in the game was culture. I did say I talked some about X's and O's. I said that after the game on Saturday. I wanted to watch it on Sunday to get that because I was just too excited to think about that on Saturday night. So I wanted to break that down a little bit in the third and final segment. But we did tell you all that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's number one sports book. And Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, the Eagles and the Chiefs, both Big 12 quarterbacks, what it's worth. Endless possibilities over at FanDuel. There's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. And whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or betting on the coin toss, there's kind of fun stuff to do over at FanDuel to get in on the action with live betting all game long. You can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. You can download the app right now and head over to fanduel.com to get started. Just bet $5 and you win $200 back in bonus bets. That's fanduel.com, $5 down, $200 back in bonus bets. Bet with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 59. Parker Ainsworth was Locked on Coogs here, talking about what happened and how Houston pulled off a victory in Phog Allen Fieldhouse in Lawrence, Kansas. Houston wins 92-86, high scoring affair, but they did play 50 minutes as it went to double OT. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what the Houston defense did and kind of where they got burned and like different parts of this game. And then I'll talk some about the offense, stuff like this as well, and look at kind of an X's and O's thing. This is a relatively speaking audio medium in the sense that we don't have, rights to game video and stuff like that in the same kind of way. But I do think it's interesting to look at like what Houston did coming in and what did and didn't work because they're going to see these guys again, right? And what you're going to carry over with you. Now, I want to go off the top and stress that if you look at any of the shooting stats from this game, part of the problem with Houston's offense was that they just flat didn't shoot the ball well. Houston was 8 of 25 from three, but most of that came in the last 7 minutes of play in a double overtime game, right? They were shooting abysmal from three for most of the contest. They also finished 14 of 25 from the free throw line. And as bad as that is, it finished better than it was as well. And so some of this, when we talk about scheme, is going to be kind of superfluous because also they just didn't make shots. But ultimately, they kind of found ways to create offense anyway, right? They found ways to get in on the action regardless. For what I mean, they did finish the regulation part of the game at 72. It's like there was a low scoring contest, right? Rebounding came out to be almost dead heat even. Kansas had 45, Houston had 43. Steals and turnovers both relatively low for both teams. Kansas did have more turnovers, but the steals part of that were about the same. Houston did get a few more points off turnovers because of that. Schematically, though, as far as what they were doing defensively to try and get those, Houston tried to turn Hunter Dickinson into an exclusive passer. Now, in some ways that did work, in some ways that did not work. Dickinson did finish, again, after playing 45 minutes of basketball, he did finish with 17 points on 11 shots, right? 11 field goals. They had some free throws in there too. But basically, what they were trying to do was every time he got the ball, they'd flash a second defender at him to make him get the ball out of his hands and make a decision. But what Kansas quickly adjusted to doing was by having their freshman big guy who hadn't played a lot to this point but he's in the starting lineup because of other injuries. Floyd Badinga, they played him at the low spot, and then the help of the helper tagging the role, so to speak, but there's no role, would have to kind of play middleman between Badinga and whoever's outside the 3-point line. Well, at first they were just outsizing that big guy with that help man with Badinga and getting some dunks and stuff like that. Houston would adjust and put a little bit longer bodies in that corner, and then you started to see Kansas flipping different guys and taking advantage of the help with shooters, and that's when you could see Rylan Griffin go 5 of 6 from behind the arc in the same kind of spots, right? Where taking advantage of Houston being aggressive and doubling a post player means that they can spit the ball out really well. And part of this is that Hunter Dickinson, while he's a very effective scorer and he beat Houston scoring the ball as a post player last year, he's also a really good passer. Now, I know he only had a couple of assists in this one, but it's not necessarily the assist I'm talking about as much as it's making the basketball play here, right? They got the ball out of his hands, and he's quickly able to get the ball into a different offense before Houston could recover. And really, over the course of the game, you saw Houston kind of switch into more of stunting, where they kind of pump a second guy out there and kind of pull him back in coverage. And that did rattle him a little bit. But on the whole, several different moments here, you saw Kansas use that Houston aggression against them. And again, they scored 72 points in regulation, right? This is not like, I'm sorry, it was 66 points in regulation. I'm doing math bad because I'm a history teacher and a math teacher, but again, 66 points in regulation. Houston had given up 60 points in a long time, and so Kansas was able to kind of take some advantage of some of those kind of things. And frankly, for what it's worth, Rylan Griffin shot the skin off the ball, played very well. DeJuan Harris, who's not, I think he's like a 30% 3-point shooter, if that. I think he's actually below that. He's more of a defensive point guard. He shot 2 or 3 behind the arc. Zeke Mayo, I guess, wasn't as effective from behind the arc, was able to pump fake and get into the lane just because of the threat that he poses out there, and got his 16 mostly on 2-point field goals, right? And so they're able to kind of speed Houston up in that way and kind of get people in rotation. But offensively, what I thought was probably more interesting than that, because Houston ultimately was able to make the adjustments, especially when Badinga fouled out in the early part of the second overtime, which is a great bit of coaching, by the way. Kansas does not send their free throw shooter to go get the rebound. It's more of a kind of keep your focus on making the shot kind of thing. And so Houston simply boxed out with the 2 low blockout guys on free throws and would let the guards go get it, especially in those late part of the games where Kansas might have fouled the guy that got the rebound, right? And Badinga bit for that, tried to pull, I think it was Robert, tried to pull Juwan Roberts back, got called for a 5th foul there. Offensively, Houston opened the game looking for 3 balls and stuff like that from Cryer and trying to get Sharp involved and whatever. Came very apparent that was not going to be the night on Saturday night, right? And that's kind of when you saw the Juwan Roberts show. So after the U16 timeout, they come over and talk to Sampson. They come out and it's a Tugler dunk on Roberts' assist. Roberts from the midi, Juwan Roberts from the midi, and then another Tugler dunk. Might have been Francis dunk on a Roberts assist either way. And that's several buckets in a row where he's the centerpiece. And so what they're doing there is they're running what's called a floppy action, where you have the 2 guards changing sides, and then you try and get a post up out of one of the 2 post players. And how they got to Roberts, he'd either flash middle if his guy played him low side, or he would get a true post up and they entered from the wing. But either way, they were taking advantage of Roberts' mismatch. I mean, there was no one on Kansas that could cover him. And so he had 24 points on the game. And honestly, I was kind of shocked when I saw that he officially only had 5 assists, say only 5 assists. I kind of felt like he had like a lot more. I think they were just crucially timed, if I'm being honest. And then also, like, if you throw the ball to somebody and they get fouled and they make free throws, you don't get the assist, but we get kind of functionally the same thing. But Roberts was the creative guy in those moments out of those floppy set kind of actions. They then, when Kansas did a little bit of adjusting and kind of knew it was coming to kind of change it up, would kind of send him to an extended, like an extra high post or something, like 20 feet away from the basket, top of the key, and they do dribble handoffs or little entry feeds and stuff like that on screen rolls, and kind of get the same kind of action moving to get him attacking downhill, but still played through Juwan Roberts. And in both at like the first U16 stint or later in the half or whatever, it all was based around making Juwan Roberts the decision maker, right? And the dribble handoffs and the floppy sets and stuff like that were all about making sure that he could get the ball and kind of see the floor and attack the defense where it's coming from. Kansas tried to double. You get JoJo Tugler dunks at that point, right? What Kansas later did was they tried to hug Roberts, and that essentially made him a better screener. So when they run that high post set with a handoff or a screen coming off of him, you then had Miles Uzan attacking the rim with essentially a free runway at Hunter Dickinson, right? Put him in no man's land. And that's when you start seeing, I mean, Miles Uzan Miles Uzan had the quietest almost triple-double I think you could have. He had 17 points, 9 assists, and 9 rebounds, which doesn't sound real. They did play 50 minutes, I guess, and he played 41 of them, but just ridiculous kind of stat line there. And he gets in the lane off the bounce there, and he has kickouts. He has kickouts that turns into swings, and he has drop-offs to Javier Francis, who does the nice reverse, right? Because they won't leave Roberts to help hedge to double, to pressure the ball screen. And so Miles has a free attack downhill. And it kind of put Kansas in a bind there as well. And then ultimately, when it kind of got to really kind of cut your teeth a little bit and figure out how you're going to win this basketball game, they got the ball in isolation spots where they just kind of cleared out and let Jawan Roberts go for it from that left hook area. And all of that, I guess, first of all, you could point out that Uzan being able to attack off that is crucial, because if we don't have that secondary option after Roberts, this doesn't matter. And a beneficiary if it was Malik Wilson attacking and popping for three. A beneficiary if it was Javier Francis, the up and unders and stuff like that. I mean, Francis had just 4 points, but I thought they were, again, like kind of the back-breaking moments where it's like they thought they had an action stop, then he does a reverse layup on up and under and stuff like that. Tugler had 9 points, kind of the same kind of thing, right? Really, really crucial things. And then, frankly, Emmanuel Sharp second three, which came in the second overtime, was the same kind of thing where it's just like, oh, we think we have it all cut off, and right, found him for it. And so on the whole, that's my most simplistic way I think I can go through, because I want to go through possession by possession. It's not quite that kind of a sport. But Houston found ways to get in the action and really punish Kansas for not being able to cover certain guys. And Kansas's inverse was trying to honestly punish the aggression of the Houston defense. Now, both teams were very equipped to do that. Houston plays West Virginia on Wednesday. Javon Small is good enough to take advantage of Houston's aggression, but we saw what Houston did to him in the H just a couple weeks ago at this point. So we got to preview that one. I'm probably not done talking about this one. There's also, I'm sure, going to be big football news or something to kind of take us off the basketball sometime this week. So make sure you subscribe to Locked on Cougs wherever you get your podcast. Hit the bell so you know we're live on YouTube after games. Locked on Cougs are primarily Locked on Podcast Network is your team every day. Go Cougs.